We had another speaker lined up to talk about AREDN and other microwave networks. And when that speaker fell through, I was just about ready to call off the conference because to me, AREDN and microwave networking was a core part of what I wanted to showcase here in Zero Retries Digital Conference. And so I contacted my buddy Orv Beach, W6BI, and said, can you come down and give the talk? He says, well, no, but I've got a better idea. Tim's going to be here. Tim writes a lot of the software for AREDN, and Tim can do a really good job. So Tim, thank you for coming, and thank you. You were coming anyway. Yes, so thank you very much for, and AREDN just rocks, and you're about to hear about a new cool option for running AREDN, but I won't spoil the thunder. Thank you, Tim.
I am Tim Wilkinson, KN6PLV. I am a humble technical ham. I got my license when I found out about AREDN, in fact. That's what made me get my license. And a technician license is all you need to mess around with this stuff. So it gives my my friends who are hams something to needle me about because they're all extras. We'll talk a little bit about what AREDN is, not where it came from, because that's not terribly exciting. And I think a lot of people know that anyway. Talk about what it does, what radios we use, what bandwidth we operate in, how people find each other to build what AREDN is, a little look at the software and how that's changed over the years, and then talk about what AREDN's actually used for. So AREDN is an IP network, if people don't know that. It runs IPv4, and it operates over the sort of spectrum that you might expect your home Wi-Fi to be operating over. So with the sort of four main bands that you can see up there, two central bands, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz is where your sort of standard home Wi-Fi's may operate at. The 900 megahertz stuff is some new stuff, which we'll talk about a little later. And then there's a little bit of AREDN operating up in the 10 gigahertz part of the spectrum, where we have a whole big chunk of spectrum, which is not doing a whole heck of a lot. Mostly because it's really difficult and expensive to buy radios up there, but it does exist and people do use it. AREDN is an open source project. We are not building our own hardware. We want to use other people's hardware. So all we need is some radios to do this with, and all we need is some software to put on these radios to do what we want to do. How hard can that be, right? So it was in its current form, AREDN is about 11 years old now. And I've only been involved with it for the last 5. So whilst I am currently the lead developer, I am one of a long line of lead developers. We chew them up and throw them away or something, I don't know. So AREDN's a network, and it's an IP network. And very importantly, we don't want people to become network engineers to use this stuff. We want people to get a radio, to get our software, to put them together, to stick them on top of their house, or up on a tower, or up on a hill, point at another AREDN network, and off you go, right? Anybody who's dealt with any form of networking knows that that's generally not how networking goes. There's a whole lot of configurations, there's a whole lot of choices you have to make. There's a whole lot of debugging to get this stuff to work. We need this stuff to be simple. We need this stuff to just work as much as possible. And we go to a lot of trouble to make sure that that's actually what happens. So this little mesh of dots is an attempt to show what AREDN is trying to do. It's trying to locate other nodes. It's trying to establish connections with them. It's trying to determine which are the best ways to get from point A to point B to point C to point D, and to get your IP traffic through that network. It doesn't care what that traffic is. It doesn't care what that traffic does. It's just a network. It's trying to move traffic around. We want to make it simple. So 2025 is an interesting year for us. When AREDN's like 11 years old in its current form, and it was built upon a protocol called OLSR. optimized link state routing or something like that, I think. It's a fairly old protocol. In fact, a lot of the technology behind meshing in this kind of networking systems is quite old. A lot of the research was done 10, 15, 20 years ago. Probably the most well-known mesh protocol that happens in most people's houses is Zigbee, right? It's a meshing protocol that reconfigures the mesh and you don't have to care. Anyway, AREDN was built on a protocol called OLSR, and OLSR is really old and really broken. It's really noisy. It basically shouts at every other node on the network, directly or indirectly, here I am, and this is how you find me. And it's prone to a whole bunch of like performance issues, uses a lot of bandwidth just to maintain itself. And it loves to loop your traffic in circles if it gets a slightly bit confused about what the heck is going on. And that's not great for us. Reliability sucks. People trying to run voice over IP phones doesn't work really well for that because it just falls apart. So 2025 was the year we finally bit the bullet and went, we need to make it better and we need to replace it with something else. There are not a lot of protocol. This mesh protocols are really interesting like 15 years ago, and some people still tinker with them. There are not a lot that still exist that people are actively developing on. But Babel is the one we chose. It comes out of a group in France, I think, originally. And it's one that these people still work on, still debug. If you send them questions on the mailing list, they will reply. They will help you with stuff. And that's, so it became our top option for what we wanted to replace our current OLSR network with. And also for the networking people in here, OLSR is a layer 3 routing protocol. And we wanted to replace it with another layer 3 routing protocol. There are some layer 2 routing protocols we could have gone with. That would have made my life so much harder to try and like move us to this network. Because one of the goals is we have to move people to a new network. We can't just destroy all these networks that exist. This stuff has to keep working. It has to be compatible. We have to migrate people seamlessly as possible over to a new system. And Babel lets us do that. So when we put Babel out there it was January 2025, and I think the first sort of like pre-production releases of Babel went out. And we're now running Babel and OLSR at the same time. So there's now 2 routing daemons trying to decide where your traffic go, which is less than ideal, but it does work. When we put that out there, we thought it's going to be years to get our community of thousands of people out there with all these nodes moving all their nodes, the new stuff, getting networks established that use Babel, and therefore be able to remove the OLSR stuff. 82% of nodes have now migrated as of last week when someone gave me the number for it. And some meshes around the US are completely transformed. They've just gone Babel everywhere. We're just doing this. This is better. And where the rest of you were waiting for you to catch up, right? So what we thought might take many years to achieve, we're gonna like just cut OLSR out next year. So it's gonna take us a year to do the migration. We're very happy with that. I mean, once we go to Babel only, I mean, when people started using the new software, there's like, oh, our repeaters that we use AREDN to link, they don't drop anymore. I'm like, really? They're like, no, it seems to work much better. I'm like, are you not imagining this? They're like, no, it's really better. I'm like, okay. So, I write a lot of software. I don't expect stuff to just work. Because that's not how it goes, right? So this has actually been really good for us. So anyway, so in a few more months, OLSR will finally be behind us. And hopefully, AREDN will have a new, much more stable and much more efficient network too. It uses, unlike OLSR, which is a very noisy protocol about, here I am, what's going on, here's how to find me. Babel is much more circumspect in what it says to other nodes about. It only talks about changes pretty much. So it's much quieter unless you have a very noisy kind of environment where the mesh is changing a lot all the time. And to be honest, most of the meshes people are building are very stable kind of creatures. So that's what we're trying to build. That's what people are building. But what do they build it with? We don't make hardware. We just cannibalize other people's hardware because that's easier. So our primary targets, shall we say, are MikroTik, and Ubiquiti. I'm a big fan of this little gadget on my right hand side here, which is a 5-point little router that a lot of people buy these, stick them in their hand shack, and this is their first connection into AREDN. This thing has a small radio in it, but this is not the kind of radio you stick on your roof and try and connect to an AREDN network. This is something that sits on your desk, right? And a lot of people start out with AREDN, particularly if they're not in an area that has much or indeed any of it, by getting one of these, calling up another AREDN mesh network and saying, can I have an internet connection to your network? And this box will then make, an IP essential connection to their network. And then they'll be on the network, their AREDN network, using, a box on their desk, right? That's not really what we want to do, right? We want to do radio. This is a good way to get people involved who don't necessarily want to climb on the top of the house anytime soon. But we want to get people to climb on the top of their house. So the real fun kind of starts when you get the real radios, right? And there's a lot of options. There are large, like decently sized mesh things like the MikroTik thing down the left. And then the other MikroTik radio is this little square thing on the right hand side, and it's a nice little radio. It's like $50. I forget what the gain is on the thing, 23-ish maybe. I have a guy who builds them into the back of bird boxes, and the reason he builds them into the back of bird boxes is because then he can put them up at HOAs. And he puts them at HOA. He paints the thing black or something so it's like less obvious. And that works, right? It's a sort of somewhat stealthy way of getting involved. At this point, we support something like 70 radios, primarily MikroTik and Ubiquiti, also a little bit of TP-Link, a little bit of GLINet, mostly desktop stuff in that case. We encourage people who are buying new radios to buy, well, firstly, we have a linked list that says this is what we support. Look at the list. We encourage people to buy the sort of modern radios, the AC radios. We do not yet support the AX radios. One day, but for the moment, AC is the way to go. This is some of the stuff on the top of my roof at home. So once you want to start putting stuff up, this is what you end up with. You end up with like a dish pointing across to some other dish. This dish here is a Ubiquiti dish. It's part of where I am. We have like a major backbone which does like 100 megabit links to support people coming like other hams coming off it. And then on the top there's some sector stuff for connections for local hams. And then, of course, we have our local ham clubs who will put the AREDN stuff up on their towers. This is sharing space up in the Oakland Hills. I'm from Berkeley in California. You could tell by the accent, I'm sure. This is up in the Oakland Hills, not too far from where I live. That we have radio stations up there, and they share tower space with those folk. And so up there they have connections across the bay to over to where Twin Peaks is, where Sutro Tower is. They have some sectors that the local hams down, because this is up high, you can see down into the Berkeley, the Oakland area, and so hams can connect up to the sectors. And then this then connects to another tower a little further down the ridge line. So locally we're trying to build a kind of circle around, sort of geographically we're lucky. We're sitting in a valley with a bunch of ridge lines around us. So we're trying to build a circle around the ridge lines. People can connect up into it. So Steve alluded to this a little bit. Once upon a time, Ubiquiti used to make some 900 megahertz Wi-Fi gear. And they did it by getting some 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi gear and then welding some kind of like down converter to the front of the thing to get this 900 stuff. And they haven't made it in a long time. And you can still find it on eBay for, I think, quite expensive at this point because people needed to replace things. Anyway, like almost 10 years ago now, the IEEE standardized a Wi-Fi 900 megahertz standard. It's called 802.11ah. And then time passes and nothing happens. And eventually a couple of companies sprung up making chipsets for this stuff. One of the chipsets is made by an outfit in Australia called Morse Micro. And very coincidentally, the open source director of that company lives down the road from me. So we had coffee, and he's like, "Hey, I shall give you some hardware." And I'm like, and you know, this is where all our open source software is. And I'm like, "Thank you very much." And now we support 900 megahertz gear on AREDN. The interesting thing about 900s is it's slower than the 5 gig stuff, but not terribly slow. I mean, you get about, we're doing some tests with it. You get about 2 actual throughput, measured throughput, like at the application layer. So not like what it quotes on the box. At the application layer, you get about 2 bits per megahertz, I think, through the system. So if you're running a 1 megahertz link, you will actually measure 2 megabits going through the device. It goes through trees, and that's nice. Where I live, that's fine. I can see hills, I can point to stuff. But if you go south from me, you get down to San Jose, it's real flat down there, and they like trees down there. And although some people can see the hills, a lot of people can't. So we have ham communities down there who, like, one of the guys maybe down there can see the site up in the hills, but his friends can't. But 900 will get them to his house and get them up into the hills. We've done some testing, and this is probably, I don't know if this is too small to read or not. So I had a guy stand in a park over in the Marin Headlands, which is across the water from me. And I climbed on the roof of my house, told my kids to listen for any noises of falling, and we pointed a couple of antennas at each other. He had I think he had a 10 dBm Yagi on his end, and I had a 17. And we vaguely pointed them at each other, and we made a link. And it's about 12 miles. We had it on a 1 megahertz channel width, so it was only doing a couple of megabits. There's a tree right between me and him, right in front of him in my front yard. I mean, I just happened to be where the tree was, but wasn't a problem. A link we couldn't have possibly made any other way, and it totally worked. Now, this was only a test. We didn't leave this thing up. He didn't want to stay in the park forever, but it was showing what this kind of technology could be done and what kind of distances and links could be made using options we didn't used to have. So, certainly for some communities, this is really going to open up what AREDN can do for them, because suddenly, connections are possible that trees had made not an option before. I like maps. Maps are super useful when you're doing this kind of stuff. Unlike some other forms of amateur radio, line of sight's super important at these frequencies, right? I mean, 5 gigahertz is not going through nothing. So you really need to be able to see where you're pointing. Is there anything in the way? Can you see them? So this is my little part of the world. This is my little part of Berkeley and our little network, or at least some of it. And the terrain can be challenging, but we can see each other, or we can see a guy who can see a guy who can see a guy, and that's of course the nature of a mesh network, right? Is this thing builds a network, and I can reach any of these points just depending on how it's routed. We have a decent sized network in the Bay Area at this point. When I took this snap, which was a while ago now, but it was like 400-ish nodes. We're currently trying to extend north towards Sacramento, which is a bit of a stretch for a San Francisco Bay Area network. And we're also trying to push down towards Monterey, which is to the south. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles group and the San Luis Obispo group, they're all pushing up the coast towards us. And there's this sort of vague idea that one day we're going to meet in the middle. And but I think that will probably happen at some point. There's only a few hops away that we have to like find places we can make this work, and then we'll be sort of joined up, and it will give us the ability to talk to each other. If other stuff isn't working. And I live in an earthquake zone. It also sets itself on fire, so stuff doesn't work all the time. So this is the oldest active AREDN node that I can find, and I think it's in the UK. It's sort of sad that when we switch OLSR off, that this won't work anymore. But that's the way things go. So this is what we used to look like, I suppose, 11 years ago at this point. And it's a very simple, very basic interface. And when this existed, what AREDN could do was a lot more limited. We rebuilt the UI last year, I think it was, to try and to streamline everything that AREDN can now do, and also to put it all in one place. So you could go to one page on your AREDN node and see what everything's going on. So this is a node up on a hill, looking down over San Francisco Airport. And as you can see, it's other nodes. It has a bunch of services. It tells you what frequencies it's talking on. You can say who it can see, how well it's doing, what the error percentages are, and it gives you some idea of the system's health. It's a much more modern interface, a little less approachable, I think, perhaps, because it's kind of overwhelming when you first get to it. But it does mean that once you're used to it, that you can just look at a page and know what the state of your hardware and your software is. We also took the opportunity to try and do some better tooling. I mean, when you're debugging this stuff, it can be difficult, right? I mean, you're balanced on the top of something possibly quite precarious, trying to work out if you can find something, or why a route isn't working, or why the signal is not where you expect it to be. And if you look at sort of like commercial software, the tooling on there is pretty good. It has good graphs of signal strength. It has good graphs of local area sort of interference and such like. Easy to trace your route through the network to try and find out where the problems are. So we wanted to introduce a lot of good tooling, which we did when we rebuilt the software. Before that, people used to have to log in and type a bunch of CLI gobbledygook into things. And again, we're trying to make the software approachable to people. I mean, it's not trivial when you get into this level, but it's a hell of a lot more approachable than type this into a command line. So people have the drop-down menus of what you can see and how you can see, and you can do trace routes, and you can do timings and stuff. You can do performance tests. It tries to make it so people at least have the tools to understand what this network is doing, and often the case, understand why it's not doing what it should be. We also added a mobile UI. Because before that, you would just get the normal UI on a very, very small phone. And that's not the best thing in the world when you're trying to install this stuff and you're trying to get your antenna pointed in just the right direction. So we have a mobile UI now, so you can, again, when you're on your tower or you're pointing a new antenna, you actually have a decent experience trying to tune this stuff and trying to get it pointed in the right direction, and access to all the tools to do that. So we've built our AREDN networks, a bunch of nodes, top of towers on top of buildings, pointed at each other, building an IP network so that you can share data in your community. Now what? Well, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, there was a group in Oklahoma City, and there was a couple of guys, and they were starting or trying to start an AREDN network in their local hand club. And as is often the problem with AREDN, is you start and you've got no one to talk to, and you've got nothing to see, and you don't know what other people are doing, and you've got no help, at least no information, and certainly no sort of you can't point people at something and say, look at this cool thing you could do here that somebody else is doing. That wasn't really possible. So they got in touch with one of the people in our local group and said, hey, is there a way we could see what you're doing? And what you could have done is you could just tunnel their network into our network. So suddenly Oklahoma City would be part of the Bay Area, which seems kind of wrong, right? They're trying to build their own resilient network that doesn't depend on us. So we came up with this super node because, you know, that's what we call things that are not just nodes, I guess. So a super node essentially allows you to connect meshes together without it becoming one big mesh, because we don't want to have one big mesh. You know, when stuff breaks, you know, your mesh needs to work, and it needs to work on its own, and it needs to provide the communications that you need in your area. And it doesn't need to depend on the fact there's an internet connection to someone in Oklahoma City or vice versa, right? So what supernodes do is it lets you build meshes of meshes. And again, it lets you build meshes of meshes without really having a, you know, without the joys of BGP or some other sort of mesh of mesh protocol system. So that's what we did. We built this thing where you could build these meshes of meshes. And at the time, a very nice chap in Fremont, just down the road from where I live, who runs there's like a big data center stroke ISP hub in Fremont called Hurricane Electric. And the chap from Hurricane Electric is a very nice man. He's like, oh, you want to put some AREDN stuff on the roof of Hurricane Electric? Sure, we can do that. So we have AREDN stuff on the roof of Hurricane Electric now, so our network goes to a data center, and then from our data center it goes out to places like Oklahoma City over Hurricane's ridiculous redundant networking system. So so we have a nice resilient path to other people, so that which is great for them to see our network if they want to. Good for us if we want any kind of resilience in any kind of like emergency situation as well, of course. The supernodes let us do some other interesting stuff as well. So the 44net talk gave us this idea of like, well, wouldn't it be nice? And this comes up every now and again. Wouldn't it be nice if you could put 44net addresses on AREDN? And we're like, yeah, that'd be good. Okay. So in the current software, you can go to 44net. You can get your allocation of addresses. Not these are the private addresses, not the ones that you would use on the WireGuard tunnel system, and not the ones you would use for BGP yourself. Just a slash, I don't know, /29 or a /30 or something, and you can stick them into your node, and you can use 44net addresses within your local mesh. That's kind of nice, particularly because we have a certain restriction on how many addresses each AREDN node can have. 44net will let you have bigger ones. You can have more stuff. But then we talked to them, I think about a year ago, and we're like, if you gave the bigger lump, we could like have 44net addresses between all the AREDN meshes as well. So people could use 44net addresses across the whole sort of mesh of meshes. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So they gave us a lump of addresses, and now you can use, if you allocate from that particular set of addresses, you can allocate, you can get a lump of that, and you can have them accessible from anywhere else on any AREDN mesh connected to any supernode. And then, although no one's taken me up on this yet, those addresses can be accessed from the internet. So you can, in theory, if you so choose, use one of those addresses to put your AREDN node onto the internet. Now that comes with a whole bunch of issues about the kind of data you want to go over your mesh, and that's entirely up to like a local mesh as choice. But it's something that can be done now. You could actually put your AREDN stuff onto the internet if you wanted to. Well, what do most people do all day with this stuff? Video is popular, of course. The first thing that people do after they put the AREDN node up is put a camera up, almost always, because it's kind of nice to be able to look around cameras and stuff. There's a project down in in Palo Alto, where they are looking at sort of amalgamating a lot of this information into sort of a command center style thing. The idea being that when there's a disaster, they want to have a civilian sort of approach to like situational awareness, and using AREDN cameras and such like to kind of gather that information into one place. So that involves, you know, video, but it also involves other things, like some people are putting up weather systems. I have a seismograph in my basement, which just tells me that I live in an earthquake zone, which I kind of knew. Some people put flight tracking up. One of my favorite ones that someone put on AREDN is that he does satellite imaging. He pulls, you know, satellite images down. I would never do that. I would never build the kit to do that. I would never stick it in my yard. But he does, and he puts all that stuff on AREDN, so anybody on our AREDN network can go and look at all this stuff he's doing. It's kind of fun. It's kind of nice. So people use it for all kinds of things. I mean, the sort of beauty of an IP network, I mean, it's why they've been so popular, is that it really doesn't care what you use it for. So people use it for all kinds of things, right? And I don't have to care what that is because it's just IP packets flying backwards and forwards. So that's what AREDN is. That's what AREDN is doing. Very high level, I guess. These are useful links to find out more. Let's see, the getting started thing is a particularly good link because we are building hey, I need to buy a radio and I need to stick it on a house. What do I need to do? And it's really a step-by-step guide to how to get that done. The world map link at the bottom, if you type that into your browser, it will ask you for your location. It will open our world map, you in the middle, so you can see what's there for you. And then, you know, Slack is a great place for people to answer questions. It's where I live, pretty much. And then, of course, we have the standard website for information. And there's also a tour of the UI from when we first released it. Changed a little bit, not that much, which is nice. And that's about it. I'm happy to take any questions or run away.
Questions, okay.
Hi,
Hello.
Samantha KM4SXP. Don't really mean to have a full-length conversation. Maybe we can talk after, but I'd be curious to whether or not you looked at OSLR v2.
I mean, very briefly.
All right.
To help. The choice of Babel was very much dictated by what is actively being developed still.
Okay.
And you know, I wanted to know that if I sent, you know, I knew who to send my email to if there was a problem, and I knew who would reply. And that dictated a lot of the choices that were involved there.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? One of the two things that have excited me was the choice of Babel, because it was happening that OLSR was bogging down, and Babel is just an inspired choice because it isn't so chatty. And as soon as I saw the announcement for that, I said, good choice. We've done it right. And the second one is the inclusion of 902 to 928, because unlike a lot of areas, even here in the Seattle area, we have a lot of high locations, but they're expensive high locations, and they're getting problematic to get to because of various changes in the site acquisition process. So being able to do mesh networking on 902 to 928 is a really good fit, in my opinion. So, and that's going to be one of my next areas of experimentation, is to get those units that are recommended, that are supported, and start experimenting with them. And I'm going to choose to try and do omnidirectional antennas and see how that works. I know, you know, you get maximum range with the beams, but I want to try it with omnis and try doing a true mesh network. How many, Tim, the question was, how many active nodes are there?
How many active nodes are there? Hang on, I could look.
Look. Okay, with that, questions for Tim going once?
Oh, come on, don't let me sign in again.
Going twice, okay.
Is Trevor still here? Would you like to do your Morse whisper? Okay. Just let them finish their.
It's about 2100, but apparently I don't get to my map right now because my internet's gone away.